The Health and Human Services Committee, where we will be hearing from the Collaboration Council of Montgomery County. And if we want to have our board come to. All right. I want to welcome my council colleagues, the committee members, Councilmember Andrew Friedson, Councilmember Ludke. I want to also encourage everyone who's tuning in, whether you're streaming on YouTube or Montgomery County Channel 16. Today we're going to discuss the work of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council, and we will be discussing the redesignation of their organization as the county's local management board for children, youth, and families. I look forward to your presentation. We will hear from our staff, and then we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Chair Sales. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank the Collaboration Council for their time and effort in preparing an in-depth memorandum in advance of the committee meeting today, as well as a really great presentation providing an overview of the updates since their last redesignation 3 years ago. So the Health and Human Services Committee will convene per the requirement within Chapter 2, Article 6 of the Montgomery County Code, which mandates the council to designate by a resolution approved by the county executive a nonprofit as the county's local management board for children, youth, and family at least every 3 years. By resolution number 20-82, adopted on March 14, 2023, the council designated the Collaboration Council as the county's local management board for another 3-year period, which expires March 14, 2026, which is why we're convening here today. The council introduced the resolution to redesignate the Collaboration Council as the county's LMB on January 27th, 2026. And as I noted, the Collaboration Council will have an in-depth presentation, but I did want to run through a few pieces in advance of their presentation. The staff report provides an overview of the role of the local management board, the legislative compliance from the Collaboration Council in meeting the requirements within the county code, as well as an update and overview on their strategic, programmatic, and fiscal updates. And finally, there are the designation options for the committee's consideration. State law requires each county to establish and maintain a local management board to ensure the implementation of a local interagency service delivery system for children, youth, and families. And the Collaboration Council has served as the local management board since 1993 and 2004 with the official legislation change. Per the county code, the primary functions of the board are to administer state funds for certain children's services and plan and coordinate those state-funded services, participate in community planning for children's services related to the state-funded programs, and apply for and administer funds for children's programs. When we look at the Collaboration Council's legislative compliance with the county code, you'll note that starting on page 3, they do meet the requirements within the Articles of Incorporation and their bylaws. And as part of the county code, they also have specific reporting requirements, including an annual audit to be conducted by an independent firm. And the links to those audits are provided for you in the staff report as well. And each year, the Collaboration Council has received an unqualified opinion or clean audit each year. They also are required to publish an annual report to showcase their operations and accomplishments for both the county government and the public, and those can all be found online as well, with the 2025 report also recently published. As part of county code, they also have to maintain specific funding agreements and have the ability to ascertain revenue from the state, local, and federal government, as well as private donations and government and private grants. The table on page 4 provides you an overview of the past 3 fiscal years of where those funding sources are coming from to support the Collaboration Council's total revenue. And you note that there has been an increase over the past few fiscal years as well, which is great, as well as specifically in private donations. A majority of the funding does come from the county government. About in fiscal year 25, 58.7% of their total revenue was from county government, about 36% from state, and 5% from private donations. The list on page 5 provides an outline of what their most recent private donations have been from the past 3 years of the designation period. Another requirement is to have a 21-member board to help lead and guide the Collaboration Council in their work and mission. As part of the board, they have to have 12 ex officio voting members and 9 private voting members as appointed by the executive and confirmed by the council. You can see the table on page 6 that provides an outline of those positions and who the current members are and their terms. I will note that there are 2 members whose terms are expiring at the end of March in 2026, but they'll move forward as the regular boards, commissions, and committees process in identifying new members and appointing them as well. It then moves on to provide strategic, programmatic, and fiscal updates from the Collaboration Council, which their presentation will review in depth, so I'll only speak to it, noting that we've included some information on how their organization internally has evolved over the past few years, as well as a high-level summary of the highlights from each of their programs, and including their new strategic framework and how they're moving forward in their work, noted as the integrity framework. Finally, we also provide an additional fiscal overview in addition to the revenues, where you can see that since fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 25, the percentage of their total revenues going directly to support programs has increased from 86% to 91%, reflecting also the overall increase in revenues that the Collaboration Council has received. And we can see the breakdown on where the funds are moving forward, what programs those funds are allocated to at the table on page 12. And before turning it over back to you, Chair Sales and Collaboration Council for their presentation, as noted previously, the Council is required to determine a nonprofit to designate as the codified local management board. And they do that through the resolution approved by the executive. And options for the committee's consideration include, of course, redesignating the Collaboration Council, or if the committee is interested in pursuing a new nonprofit as the county's local management board. We don't have a designated process on how to move forward in that, but that may require revisions to the code and council and executive support in establishing that new nonprofit. But council staff does recommend redesignating the Collaboration Council as the local management board.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez Hernandez, for that overview, and thank you to everyone here. I guess we will start with Mr. Wheeler, if you want to introduce everyone or have everyone introduce themselves, and then we're ready to get started.
Sure. Good afternoon, Council Chair, Committee Chair, Sales, members Friedson and Lukey. Glad to be here with you all this afternoon. Join me at the dais is our Vice Chair, current interim Board Chair, Sharon Sitchie, Jane Park, Alicia Chuney, Farah Nagir Cantor, and Joe Hooks, who's a community partner of ours. And with that said, we'll start with Sharon.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here today in support of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council and its redesignation as a local management board. I'm Sharon Sitchie. I have the privilege of serving as committee member on the Collaboration Council's Board of Directors, and I'm one of 9 private sector community representatives and currently serve as vice chair and member of the executive committee. The chair of the board is on maternity leave, and I've been asked to speak on her behalf, or behalf of the board, to share a bit with you about the Collaboration Council's work at the board level over the past 3 years since I've joined, and since the last redesignation of in March of 2023. I'd like to begin on a personal note, sharing why I joined this board and what I've learned in doing so. I've worked in the nonprofit sector in Montgomery County for many years. And prior to joining the board, I believed I had a solid understanding of the Collaboration Council's role. Through my previous work with the nonprofit Main Street, our organizations partnered around a shared goal of fostering thriving, inclusive communities. That partnership was deeply synergistic and demonstrated the Collaboration Council's authentic commitment to equity and disability justice, most notably with our time working together through a 4-part disability justice and racial justice series called the Conversations Matter, which Main Street co-hosted with the Collaboration Council. Following that experience, when a community member vacancy opened up on the board, I was eager to apply. But having joined the board and spent the last few years peeling back the curtain and learning more about the singular role of an LMB and the unique approach that Collaboration Council takes to its work and role, I'm even more excited to be a part of this organization and to introduce staff to share with you some of the paradigm shifting work we've embarked upon together. As this committee well knows, the LMB is not a direct service provider, and in Montgomery County, it is not a part of local government. Rather, it sits in a collaborative space between local government and community, ensuring, I keep losing my spot here, and its font is so big, ensuring that government, in this case, the DHHS, programmatic needs are met effectively and efficiently by direct service providers, while at the same time keeping a pulse on community needs and assets to better align system-level decisions with on-the-ground realities. The Collaboration Council currently holds 9 county contracts and works closely with the contract monitors and administrators to ensure the county's priorities are reflected in service provision and quantitative and qualitative data, and it's captured to inform county decision-making. This much I understood before I joined the board. What I did not understand is the special role that the Collaboration Council serves as a conduit to the state, particularly the Governor's Office for Children. We've been privileged here in Montgomery County to have Elijah Wheeler as the LMB Executive Director because he also serves as the co-chair of the LMB Association of Maryland and is in continual dialogue with state leaders around its priorities and how the state's investment shows up in Montgomery County and aligns with our county needs. This information he brings back to the board so we can make strategic decisions about the organization's work in the county. Elijah and his team will share more about this in a moment. At the board level, we are fortunate to have representation from county and state agencies, all with subject matter expertise that informs our programmatic direction, fiscal oversight, and strategic approach. A few examples. Deborah Lambert from OMB serves on our fiscal committee and reviews financial reports quarterly. Wanda Frank-Little from the Department of Juvenile Services chairs our governance committee, and Elaine Bonner-Tompkins serves as a community member with vast knowledge of county demographics and dynamics. We as a board have developed an integrity framework that guides our work on both a board and staff level. You will hear from Elijah in a bit more about the framework, but I'd like to note that we do actually use it in decision-making at the board level, which is a refreshing change from the increasingly antiquated strategic plan that is often stale before it's published because community needs change too quickly for it to serve more than a year at most. Speaking of rapid change, I will note that at a time of mass turnover, which I can personally attest to, in the nonprofit sector, for reasons beyond the scope of this work session, the Collaboration Council's Board of Directors is grateful for Elijah's consistent and steady leadership over the past 6 years. Budgets have shifted, needs have intensified, community power has emerged in new areas and diminished in others. But amidst all these changes, the Collaboration Council Board of Directors has had the assurance that it has a leader who has an ear to the ground at the state, county, and community level and helps us make informed decisions. So I just thought it might make sense for me to share a little bit more about that. I think we have a slide that will be up somewhere. I just want to share a little bit about our organizational structure at this time. I'm not going to read it all to you because all of this is in the memo. It's just a highlight here. But the staff, we have 15 full-time employees. Elijah is obviously the executive director. He's been so since 2020, and he's been with the organization for 16 years. Our board has 21 members. It's both public and private partnership, as you know. The organizational leadership, industries, representatives of government agencies working, now I'm reading it to you, which I don't need to read the whole thing, but you get the point. It really is a cohesive mix with a lot of lenses, which is really refreshing as well. And then we are state partners, which really is a unique piece of this puzzle because it really does pull us together with so many different lenses, especially with the money that the state is providing. And Elijah has served as an MALMB board chair and co-chair since 2021. And so without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn this presentation over to Elijah now to highlight some of the programmatic accomplishments and challenges over the past 3 years since we last appeared before this committee for redesignation in 2023. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon again. As already stated, Elijah Wheeler, Executive Director of the Collaboration Council. I've had the pleasure of serving as Executive Director for the past 6 years, being with the organization for 16. Feel like somewhat of a dinosaur at this point, but it's been nothing more than a pleasure. I have a lot of experience working with you all, obviously, with Councilperson Friedson, who served as former board chair of Collaboration Council many years ago before he engaged in his political endeavors. The first thing that I want to do is I want to acknowledge our staff sitting directly behind me because the work that we do would not be possible without folks who are as dedicated as the people who are sitting behind me. One of the things that I like to say about our staff is that our staff looks like Montgomery County. It really looks like the nation. We're diverse. We are the fabric of what makes this community so great. Before we discuss programs, budgets, or outcomes, I want to start with why we exist, because the why has fundamentally shaped how we have worked and how we plan to work, which produces results over the past 3 years and what we're here to share with you all today. So starting with this first slide here, our vision statement, the world that we are working toward. Our vision is simple to state and complex to achieve: thriving communities across Montgomery County where every resident has what they need to be safe, healthy, and successful. But here's what makes our vision distinctive. We don't believe thriving happens to communities. We believe it happens through communities. We're not here to do things for people. We do not provide direct services, as already been mentioned. We're here to create conditions where people have the power, resources, and connections to shape their own lives and their own neighborhoods. That vision, community power, not service dependency, is what distinguishes us from a traditional service delivery nonprofit. And it's what makes the local management board role the right fit for who we are as a collaboration council. Our mission statement, what we actually do. Our mission, as it's been for the past 30 years, is to promote the well-being of children, youth, and families through collaborative partnerships, being a catalyst for agencies and other groups to work together to achieve positive results in the community. But 3 years ago, we pivoted that mission to something that truly reflects our evolution, creating collaborative opportunities for people to learn about, understand, shape, and participate in thriving communities across our county. Notice the verbs here: learn, understand, shape, and participate. Not receive services, not benefit from programs, but actively shape their own communities. That addition was not cosmetic. It reflected a fundamental shift in how we understand our role as a local management board. We're not just coordinators of services or monitors of contracts. We're builders of community capacity. We're not just conveners of agencies, but we're striving to be platforms for community voice and power. So from our mission to framework. Many organizations have inspiring mission statements that sound good on websites, but don't change how decisions actually get made. We were determined not to be that kind of organization. So in 2023, after extensive work with the staff, board, and our community partners, we codified something we call our integrity framework. I think we can go to the next slide. And I use that word codified intentionally. This wasn't wordsmithing or marketing language. This was operational architecture. It's the infrastructure that translates our vision and mission into actual decisions, actual resource allocation, and actual behavior change. I'll be brief in providing an overview of what that means, but I'll begin with our core responsibilities and then transition into our integrity framework. I think it was the previous slide had our core responsibilities. Okay, we're good. Thank you. So we have 6 strategic approaches, and notice they're all relational. They're about how we work with people, not what we do to or for them. And I'll just highlight 3 here instead of going through the entire list. So community engagement. Advancing community-centered responsibility by integrating the experience, knowledge, and skills of people most affected into design, implementation, and assessment of programs. Community is engaged when they have the power to use their lived experience to influence the things that affect their lives, not consult, not advise, but to actually influence. Convening. Bringing people together to build relationships, develop shared values, and establish shared understanding. This is about connection and commitment, not just coordination. Advocating for community-focused systems change. Creating transformational change by amplifying community lived experience and validated data in ways that influence power dynamics and decision-making to advance practices and systems to improve outcomes and interrupt or dismantle those that do not. So with all 6 strategies, they have something in common. They're not about us. We're weavers, builders, connectors, supporters, and amplifiers. We create conditions for community and agencies to do their best work. That's the role of a local management board. An enabler, not a direct service provider or doer. So now we can transit. Thank you. So our integrity framework, it has 4 layers. Those 4 layers are community outcomes that we're working toward, guiding perspectives that shape our worldview, strategic approaches that define how we work, and behavioral commitments that govern how we treat each other. For the sake of time today, I'm just going to focus on one of those, which will be community outcomes. So that first layer, the three areas in which we're trying to create change, reflect to these community outcomes within our integrity framework: affirmation and agency, interdependence, connection and belonging, and community-aligned systems. So starting with affirmation and agency, people need to genuinely have power over their lives, not just feel like they do. They need to meet their basic needs: shelter, food, health, education, and work. They need to experience affirmation of their full humanity, to be seen and valued for who they are. Number two, interdependence, connection, and belonging. People need to feel connected to family, place, and the broader community. They need to appreciate the value of partnership, understanding that we can't thrive in isolation, that we need one another in order to be able to thrive. And then lastly, area three, community-aligned systems. Organizations and governments need to be responsive to the people most affected by their work. The people designing and implementing programs need to be knowledgeable, experienced, guided by, and accountable to the community outcomes, not just professional expertise. These three outcome areas, affirmation and agency, interdependence and belonging, community-aligned systems, are our goals in all that we do, every decision that we make, and everything that we carry out. But we ask, what does this advance in these outcomes? And why does this framework matter? That's our integrity framework, the four layers, which I just gave an overview of one, and multiple elements within each layer. I want to share with you briefly why this matters, specifically here today for redesignation. Reason one, it translates values into decisions. Most organizations have values that live on walls. Ours live in our decisions. I'll share with you how. When we approached our 2023 CNA, otherwise known as our Community Needs Assessment, we asked, can we conduct a CNA in a way that aligns with our integrity framework? Community outcomes said people need genuine power, and systems must be accountable to community. Our guiding perspective said that to be community-driven, we need to think systematically and center anti-oppression. Our strategic approaches said to us that we need to engage with community with real influence, convening for relationships, and advocating for systems change. And lastly, our behavioral commitments said to us that we need to trust people, be accountable to their input, and adapt based on that learning and feedback that we receive from them. Those framework elements led us to reject the traditional consultant-led CNA process and instead create the community change agent approach that you'll hear about shortly from my colleague Jane. Not because it was easier, actually because it was harder, but because it was also aligned with who we are. And that's how the framework works. It's a decision-making filter. Every major choice passes through it. Reason two, it creates accountability. The framework also creates that accountability not just to ourselves, but to community and also to you as funders. It allows us to question whether or not we're actually living out our values. The framework gives community permission to hold us accountable. It gives staff language to name what we're drifting, if we are drifting from our values, and it gives the board criteria for assessing whether we're operating with that full integrity. That's powerful, and most organizations talk about accountability, to community as a great idea, but we built it into our operating system, almost like an iPhone. So we're constantly updating our approach to, I don't know if that was a...
It don't need to be replaced.
Let me say, with no planned obsolescence, okay? So I should say that, okay? So that iOS is constantly updating in real time. Reason three, it also guides resource allocation. As you heard earlier, majority of our budget goes back out in the community. This past year, 91% of our budget went back out into community programs, right? We don't keep it within house. We make sure that it's actually going to lead to the impact in which we're looking for. The pandemic taught us that communities needed true systems change support, not solely trainings or professional development workshops. So in FY23, when we carried out our CNA, we assessed our investments and created a community organizer position, Sella is behind me in the audience, to deepen our work within community. That framework drove the decision, not a consultant with recommendations, not funder preferences, but alignment with our stated values as a part of our framework. Lastly, it attracts the right partners. When the William Julius Wilson Institute was looking for a jurisdiction to study for community-driven poverty alleviation, they chose us here in Montgomery County. Why? Because we had an integrity framework which signaled that we were serious about community power, not just talking about it. When the Meyer Foundation was selecting a nonprofit partner for the county's MOCO Boost Guaranteed Income pilot, they chose us. Why? Because our framework demonstrated systems thinking and community-driven orientation, not just service delivery. The framework is a signal to the ecosystem, and it attracts partners who share our commitment to community power and systems change. So that's the integrity framework in action. It's not a reference document sitting on the shelf. It's, again, an operating system that guides every decision that we make. So why does this matter for redesignation? Reason one, again, integrity produces results. Organizations with clear values that guide actual decisions outperform organizations with values as decoration. Research has backed this up, and our results back that up. Reason two, the framework enables innovation, and it also gives us permission to innovate while maintaining accountability to everyone, the community and our government included. And that's how you get responsible innovation, not change for change's sake, but values-driven evolution. And then reason three, the framework is transferable. Montgomery County doesn't just benefit from our stated outcomes. You benefit from being that jurisdiction that pioneered a replicable model. When other counties adapt this approach, which they've already tried to start by reaching out to us, they'll cite us as the source. That's reputation value with a multiplier effect. So bringing this all together, our vision, which is thriving communities where people have power to shape their own lives, our mission, which is promoting well-being through collaborative partnerships and creating opportunities for people to learn, understand, shape, and participate in their communities, and our integrity framework, the four-layer operational architecture that translates that vision and mission into actual decisions, actual resource allocation, and actual behavior change. This is who we are, not solely who we aspire to be. Who we are, evidenced by community change agents making binding decisions, by a CNA methodology that centered community leadership, by grant processes redesigned with community-identified barriers, and by 30 years of sustained partnerships with agencies who voluntarily participate because we create value. If you choose to redesignate the Collaboration Council, you're not just continuing a contractual relationship, you're partnering with an organization that has clarity about its purpose, integrity in its operations, and a track record of translating value into measurable results. That's the foundation. Now I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Jane Park, and others to share with you, what we've built with that foundation. Jane.
Thank you, Elijah. Good afternoon. I'm going to spend my time just talking about some of our major highlights from the past several years in terms of the steps we've taken to involve, engage, and center impacted community members in the work of our organization. So I'm going to review two specific examples that demonstrate how we have been developing new approaches to community engagement by moving away from top-down decision-making and towards involving community members as trusted partners in both understanding challenges and developing solutions. So the first example I wanted to talk about is the Climate Justice Co-Creation Initiative. Since 2022, Collaboration Council has helped to convene a collaborative effort between the county's Department of Environmental Protection, several community-based organizations, and grassroots community members themselves to address the impacts of climate change on low-income communities of color, specifically as it relates to extreme heat, flooding, drought, and worsening air quality. Working with our government and community partners, we have designed and are implementing a series of approaches that include the following. The first is strengthening grassroots leadership through trainings on participatory action research and advocacy, where community members are gathering data and insights in their communities on the impact of these climate hazards. The second is building county staff capacity through trainings on equitable community engagement in order to prepare them to partner with community members in a collaborative governance process. And finally, we are creating two-way engagement channels by connecting the trained community members and trained county staff to co-develop data-informed, community-driven climate solutions in the areas of flooding, extreme heat, drought, and air quality. The second example that Elijah already mentioned is our 2023 Community Needs Assessment process. Unlike more traditional CNAs that rely on academic forms of research and one-way community engagement approaches, such as surveys or one-time focus groups, we wanted to do things differently. Next slide, please. So the first step we took was to partner with the community-based organization Everyday Canvassing, who many of you are probably familiar with, and asked for their help in identifying community members from across the county whom we could bring into our assessment process. With the help of Everyday Canvassing, we invited, hosted, and facilitated 3 cohorts of community members representing diverse backgrounds and demographics from across the county. All 3 cohorts participated in a series of thoughtfully designed and facilitated community conversations over many months with an emphasis on trust building. Out of this community-centered CNA process, the following outcomes emerged. First, while each community member who was part of the process brought a range of personal experiences and challenges to the conversation, there was consensus that the most impactful and successful community solutions were those that were place-based and that included community members themselves in decision-making. What we learned from this community informed our decision to move forward this year with a community-led, place-based approach, which Elijah will talk about later in the presentation. Secondly, through flexible private funding we received from the Marriott Foundation, we launched a Community Change Grants Program where we involved community members from the CNA process in helping us select grant award recipients. 4 nonprofits were chosen to receive grants of $10,000 each. 3 of these nonprofits were focused on a place-based approach, 1 on youth leadership development. Finally, we have produced a 40-minute documentary film that centers the voices of 4 community members whose experiences speak to some of the issues that emerged from the CNA process. Through the power of film, our goal is to connect viewers not just intellectually, but emotionally with the hard realities and systemic barriers faced by so many in the county. Both the film and an accompanying watch guide will soon be distributed to our partners in state and county government, nonprofit organizations, philanthropy, and community. We will encourage our partners to organize groups to view the film and engage in facilitated conversations with the goal of moving towards concrete action steps within their spheres of influence. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Alicia, who will be talking about some of our youth programs.
Next slide, please. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alicia Chuney. I am the Director of Youth and Young Adult Programs at the Collaboration Council, and today I am here to share with you all the impact of Collaboration Council's community-based youth programming. I will focus on 3 key initiatives. The first is MOCA Reconnect. We'll talk about our out-of-school time initiative and Pathways to Services. MOCA Reconnect serves young people 16 to 24 who are navigating transitions and seeking stability, connection, and opportunity. Many of the young people visiting MOCA Reconnect are building their futures while facing systemic barriers. This includes housing insecurity, limited access to consistent support at school, in their communities, or within their families. MOCA Reconnect remains the only youth-dedicated drop-in center in Montgomery County, and we provide 2 warm meals daily, access to showers and laundry, clothing, and support from trusted and caring adults. Last fiscal year, 259 young people visited the drop-in center nearly 1,500 times. Through targeted outreach efforts and partnerships with Pathways to Housing DC, we identified 59 youth in need of housing support, and we successfully housed 38 of them. The outcome is significant given the limited availability of youth-dedicated housing in Montgomery County. I would be remiss if I didn't speak to the youth voice that has been at the forefront of the work at MOCA Reconnect. Our Youth Action Board played a critical role in supporting the creation of the county's first youth coordinated entry framework in partnership with the ICH and the ICH Youth Work Group. This framework establishes a clear pathway to youth-dedicated housing. They also contributed to early focus groups for the Office of Youth Resilience and supported Councilwoman Kate Stewart's youth mental health efforts. Next slide, please. The next program I'd like to highlight is our Out of School Time Initiative, which operates in partnership with Montgomery County Recreation and MCPS. Over the past 3 years, we focused on expanding provider capacity, strengthening program performance, and elevating youth-centered outcomes. We've provided advancing youth development training and youth program quality tool training to equip providers with the frameworks and tools needed for continuous improvement. As a result, in FY25, young people reported overwhelmingly positive feedback regarding staff relationships, program quality, and their senses of belonging and personal growth. These investments in training and quality improvements have strengthened the consistency and effectiveness of programming across sites. Next slide, please. And finally, our Pathways to Service program serves as a central resource line connecting young people and families to community-based supports throughout Montgomery County. Anyone in the county can call for assistance navigating available resources. Over the past 3 years, we've seen a 65% increase in calls to the service line. This is a strong indicator that families know where to turn and trust the support available. FY25 brought several important developments as well. This was the first year we received requests specifically for autism-related supports, reflecting growing complexity and community needs. We expanded access for non-English speaking families through the use of Ad-Strata interpretation services. And through a new partnership with Parents Place of Maryland, we strengthened support of families navigating mental health services. Across these programs, we've seen growth in reach, depth of impact, and systems coordination over the last 3 years. More young people are being served, more young people are being housed, more families are accessing coordinated support, and youth voice is shaping how systems are built. And I'm going to now pass it to my colleague, Farah. Oh, no, back to Elijah. I'm sorry.
I'll pass to Farah really rapidly. Just one slide before we get to Farah. As you can see here, where we start to discuss leveraging state dollars as a local management board. So we serve as a critical conduit in ensuring these dollars are coming down from the state into Montgomery County. But our role isn't simply as a money pass-through. We're a strategic multiplier, turning state dollars into community impact through local knowledge, partnership leverage, and coordination infrastructure. I'm going to show you briefly how that works. We're going to watch a really short video on the next slide here, starting with the integral role that we played in assisting Governor Moore's leadership team in integrating how to engage community in the rollout of the Enough initiative. Following this video, I will then pass it over to my colleague Farah to talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing with Enough here locally in Montgomery County. Thank you. For what it looks like to be a resident of Montgomery County. While it could have been easy for us to have met in an office space and had a conversation covering data and other salient points, we felt it was far more important to raise those numbers and those stories off of paper and to humanize them by allowing for our partners to meet with us and our partners in the communities where they actually live so that they could share their stories in the first person, an authentic way in which we believe stories should be shared. We believe in place-based, people-focused solutions, and one of the best ways of doing so is by embarking upon a tour in partnership with collaborators like Everyday Canvassing so that we can show people's real stories, so that we can hear those authentic truths from people, and so that we can work collectively and collaboratively together to redress some of the issues and disparities that many people face as residents of Montgomery County today. We felt it was important to travel across such a wide swath of Montgomery County geographically speaking today, because we wanted to have a conversation specifically about the narrative in Montgomery County for those who live outside of this place versus the Montgomery County that we know for those of us who live and work here ourselves. We recognize the fact that there are pockets of wealth and large concentrations of disparity. We're deeply grateful for the stories that were shared, many in confidence. One of the main things that we agreed upon today as we embarked upon the beginning of this tour as a part of our community agreements was the fact that stories stay, but the lessons leave. We're hoping that the lessons that were learned here today not only leave, but help to inform the work that we do in the future. We hope that it helps to inform the work of the governor's office in the future. We hope that it helps to inform the work of the Harlem Children's Zone in the future. More importantly, we hope that it helps to impact and lead to some sort of transformational change for those who we wish to serve in the future as well, too.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Farah Najir Kanther, and as you saw in the video, the community-led approach that informed our last CNA process actually did inform the Governor's Office for Children's Enough initiative. And Enough, of course, stands for Engaging Neighborhoods, Organizations, Unions, Governments, and Households. It's a lot. In the last fiscal year, Collaboration Council received LMB-specific funding under the Enough initiative to provide high-quality capacity building, addressing childhood poverty here in the county. And with this investment, we were able to do 3 key things in the county. First, we developed and delivered a 10-part training series serving 9 organizations around the county on topics including equitable partnerships, participatory action research that Jane referenced earlier, and data and evaluation. And the picture of the guide that you see on the slide here is one of the enduring resources that came out of this work. 2, we directly funded 4 place-based initiatives in Up County, Mid County, and East County that provide culturally appropriate food and nutrition services in the communities where they're located, professional pathways in maternal health, and youth engagement and leadership development programming. And the third key thing that we did as part of this work was to strengthen coordination between community and county partners, particularly the MCPS Community Schools team, which is a key partner in the Enough initiative statewide. So this matters for a couple of reasons. In the county, it matters at the community level. Organizations working in communities like Long Branch or Wheaton or Montgomery Village would not have had the chance to pause, learn, and improve if it weren't for the tailored training that we were able to provide as the LMB. Training participants actually said that receiving funding that wasn't tied to program or service delivery actually allowed them to be more genuine in how they worked alongside their communities to identify and address their needs. It matters too at the systems level. So because of our convening capacity as the local management board, we were able to bring together county agencies and nonprofit organizations to engage in partnerships and effective conversations that may not have happened as efficiently, or maybe not have happened at all if it weren't for us being able to bring people together in neutral spaces with mutual respect. And through this work, we were able to bridge knowledge and relationship gaps that existed. And we provided skills trainings for community school liaisons, for example, and members of the out-of-school time network, all with the goal of, really collaborating with our time, our talent, and our shared resources to address the wraparound needs of children and families in the county. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joseph Hooks, founder and director at 480 Club, to share a little bit more about how 480 Club is leveraging resources to innovate and expand youth programming in the county, and also Amalia Lopez, deputy director at Girls on the Run, will join the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I have a next slide for myself, but glad to be here with Girls on the Run. So I'm going first. But first, I just want to say, probably they are who they say they are. Everything about their values, their staff. I've had a pleasure to at least be a part of a little bit of everything. First here today on the Sliders of Sports, thanks to Sydney and being on the Out of School Time Network. The capacity building trainings, like they said, was very helpful, engaging, and supportive for especially small organizations like myself. The Basics program with Angelica and her outreach and reach. The Brookings Institute stuff you'll hear about later with Stella, impacting over 80 black men on black wellness. And then we almost had some potential funding from DJS working with Alicia, which was a great proposal that would do some great impact. And I honestly want to say, if it doesn't come up, the AYD training, Advanced Youth Development, is one of the highest prestige foundation work that not only we have, but other organizations have benefited from that has impacted our Montgomery County youth and residents. So what you see here on the slide, you got a lot of information in your packet. I love just removing barriers, and so 480 Club is just, started off in the county just with the amount of minutes for barrier I saw. And, I wanted to also note that 480 Club is not a nonprofit, and so it allows me, smaller, to have a contract to deliver free at cost programming that eliminates a lot of these barriers. And as you know, you see the soccer program, which has got a lot of highlight, from the cost to play to registration, the league fee, the MTPS buses, to the food, hot meal, snack, high-quality certified coaches, transportation, and also enrichment trips. I just booked our field trip to our annual DC United game on May 23rd. These kids have actually, for the first time, played on a soccer field through this program. We had a few that showed up at Councilmember Evans' listening session, and I'm really proud of the advocacy and what they call now more of a family. I don't identify them as a cohort or a program familiar, and I've seen many kids, like in the data show, the retention. We've had some age out, which has been somewhat of a concern, but I've always tried to pivot them to the next opportunity, if it's Soccer for Change or EBB. But a lot of them are still with us today, waiting for us for the next time to provide this program. So we kick off in about a few weeks. One thing I just want to also emphasize is, Montgomery County Collaboration Board being nimble, it allows me to be nimble. And so though we do have resources and rich supports in the county, this helps me to target identified areas like the Cider Mill, Montgomery Village community, Gaithersburg, work with the community schools to identify kids that really eliminate kids that maybe have missed their sports physical deadline, that don't have immigration status. We have no tryouts, no fee, no bias, first come, first serve, and we are always at a capacity with retention. And so this funding has allowed me to be consistent, which is very key to youth development. But also just not soccer, it allows me to grow with the basketball, which is a great way to bring people together. We have 40 plus students signed up tomorrow on Friday for Gaithersburg Middle School in Forest Oak for a free out of school time clinic where we provide a high quality clinic, partnering with the community schools to provide a meal for kids to get home. And then we also have football engagements where we provide safe space and training. I have 60 plus MCPS student athletes that will be playing in a tournament in Virginia, but to bring kids from Damascus to Kennedy, from Sherwood to Northwest all together with all diversity, it allows me, which is totally separate from the other contracts and programs that I have in Montgomery County. And so, again, nimble, and I really appreciate the partnership and impact, and really just continue to consistently. And I've also shared, thanks to Collaboration Council on the GOC, but also I'll just share the fear of, with the state being under a lot of stress as much as the county, definitely federal, if this program is not funded, it will be gone. And you see in the study, 68% said they couldn't afford it before. And when I survey my families, I say, what are you going to do? We're going to wait for me or sign up for something else? And they say, wait for you. So having that trusted, consistent program, I have done my job. Besides, when I say education, we have Worksource Montgomery come out. We've had Montgomery County Rec Outreach Program, and we're trying to connect them more to the city of Gaithersburg. So trying to diverge them into other systems, trust other systems to get what they need. And there is a high need of girl programming, which we'll have Girls on the Run, and high school programming too. So I just love to be a partner. Glad to be here today. I feel like I'm part of the family since 40 Club. It's really strictly focused on out of school time. I don't want to rank any of my contract monitors, but I would say if I had to choose one, it would be Collaboration Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. So great to be here. I am Amalia Lopez. I'm the Deputy Director for Girls on the Run in Montgomery County. And we've been partners with the Collaboration Council for years. We're part of the Out of School Time Network, really providers, but also partners in this work that we're doing. What I'm highlighting today is our GOC state funding. So some of the information you see on the screen is just last 2 fiscal years, doesn't even include this year, what we were able to do with the funding to really target participants that really need it the most. So 26 teams, 339 girls, every single one of them got a pair of shoes. And this is really how we're able to work in the community to really facilitate what families need. We know from OLO reports that families need support on timing and location, cost, and even competitiveness is a big barrier to sports participation. So Girls on the Run is designed to remove every single one of those barriers. We do programming inside of schools, rec centers, wherever the participants are. There's no transportation challenge. We provide scholarships, free shoes, so that cost is never a barrier. It's not competitive. Everyone is welcome from every single ability level. Our curriculum is research-backed. We build life skills and include that physical activity component. 97% of our participants learn life skills, which then help reduce risky behaviors. They learn social connection, making good decisions, and really focusing on their emotions and mental health. Our coaches meet the girls where they are emotionally, not just physically. And at the season end 5K, it's a magical moment. All of the girls get to see what they can do with their own 2 feet. One of our participants said, "I'm capable of achieving anything I set my mind to, even if the goal seems far away." So even if that's a really lofty goal, we know from our girls that they're capable of doing it. So our outcomes ripple to families, communities, schools, and local nonprofits like Girls on the Run here, just in Montgomery County. We face real barriers in leveraging state funding. We are just one county, so without the Collaboration Council, without this partnership, we wouldn't be able to provide the shoes, the scholarships, the smiles to the girls at UC. By redesignating the Collaboration Council as our local management board, we'd be able to continue this incredible work and reaching those state funds. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to highlight next how we've cultivated strong support from the philanthropic sector, starting with innovative work we've done in partnership with the Brookings Institution, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and our community partner 480 Club. You heard Joe speak to this briefly earlier, but WIBL, which is short for Wellness and Black Life, was created to engage directly with communities and learn how Black men understand well-being, how they define it, and how to strengthen it for themselves, their families, and their communities. Too often, Black men are left out of well-being research, and for many reasons do not regularly participate in research studies either. WIBL intentionally centered their voices and experiences to reframe that conversation. As a part of the data collection process and research, community convenings were held across the nation in Little Rock, Arkansas, Baltimore, Maryland, and right here in Montgomery County over the course of 2024 into 2025. We were selected along with the other sites not only for our well-documented racial inequities, but also for our deep community ties and local assets that can serve as building blocks for well-being. We, along with 480 Club as our community partner, developed tailored strategies for recruiting Black men and facilitating meaningful conversations. Lastly, as we close this slide and transition to the next one, we are currently working with Brookings Institution to leverage even more additional private dollars to continue to carry out this work as we head into 2026 and 2027. Next slide. Okay, fiscal accountability. Go to the next slide. As you can see on the slide, our operating budget over the past 3 years is growing because we're attracting more outside money, not because the county is necessarily spending more. We've become increasingly attractive to private funders who didn't exist in our portfolio even 3 years ago. A 12% budget increase over 3 years from $6 million to $6.7 is meaningful. Roughly $300K from private sources whose share grew, as you can see here, fivefold from 1% to 5% over the course of those 3 fiscal years, and the remainder from the interplay of county stability and state decline. The county isn't the sole reason the budget has grown, diversification is, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the work that you all have done in continuing to add that additional 2% onto nonprofit contracts here in the county, because you recognize that the cost of doing business is not cheap, and nonprofits largely bear the burden of anything that's happening in the community in order to offset some of the things that are happening with county government agencies. So you all deserve kudos for that support as well, too. Doing business, as you all know, is not cheap, and paying employees a living wage continues to grow. And I'm sure our employees want to make sure that they continue to be paid a living wage so that they can be suitable, or so that the wage can be suitable for them to live here in Montgomery County. So, again, county support has remained stable and grown a little bit as a share of our growing budget, and our private investment continues to grow. Next slide. As you can see here, we have an increase again in our private funding. I don't think it's small to acknowledge that we've grown from the $165K in private funds in FY23 to close to $400K in FY25. Since December alone of this past year, we have already raised $105,000 in private funds. So we are on track to meet or surpass where we were at in FY26. I do want to take a moment out to acknowledge the Meyer Foundation, the Marriott Foundation as partners. First-time partners to the county, Patagonia and Bombas as well, too, who had never invested in Montgomery County before. Typically, what you'll see with private entities is they will go toward D.C. and Baltimore, and they will bypass Montgomery County. We've cultivated relationships with these entities to make them see the importance of our work to then invest in Montgomery County. And then lastly, I want to make sure that I also shout out the National Basketball Players Association, who had never invested in Montgomery County prior to their investment with the Collaboration Council. Again, typically they invest solely where their basketball teams are located. So in this case, the Wizards, you can argue whether or not that's a real basketball team, but they don't invest outside of Washington, D.C. Our expenses here, again, I foreshadowed this earlier, 91% of our program, or 91% of our budget went into program funds. Back out in the community this past year, that's no small change either. Again, so while we're making sure that we're doing everything we can to pay our employees a living wage, we're also making sure that the folks doing the work, you know, Amalia, Joe, other folks, I believe Ludley might be here in the audience. Pride, you said Ludley's. So we're making sure that they're funded at the rate that they need to, because their work is expensive as well too. Next slide. So we talked about the state, and as you saw, the share of the state being roughly, you know, around 30-something%, and understanding that next year, as the state has already signaled, they're preparing for it to be a really difficult fiscal year, and the consideration of having to take some austerity measures. What we want to do is we want to highlight those partners at the state level in Annapolis who, even in the face of those austerity measures that are being discussed, went forward with sponsoring bills on both the Senate and House side to add an additional $3 million to the state local management board budget. So Senator Nancy King on the Senate side and Delegate Emily Shetty on the House side, along with Laura Charkoudian and Aaron Kaufman are co-sponsors of those bills. The Senate bill was already heard this week and passed, and the House bill will be heard I believe within the next week or so. So we're really pleased with our longtime partnership with them. Also want to highlight Gabe Acevero, who is a partner, and Jared Solomon, who also helped us to get a bill at the state level to get MOCA Reconnect, a bond bill that is, to get MOCA Reconnect up and running with some of those capital funds. Again, that's an acknowledgement of the work that local management boards do, understanding that we're facing down some of these issues at the state level, but they yet and still stood up and are putting this bill forward. So looking ahead, next slide. As Jane mentioned earlier, we're getting ready to embark on our next 3-year community needs assessment plan and strategy. And that wasn't just a compliance exercise that when we carried it out in 2023, it fundamentally transformed how we work as a local management board. It served as an example of our organizational evolution and wasn't just a checkbox requirement. This CNA this time around will be focusing in on the Up-County region, with a few places in particular of focus. As you can see here, Germantown, Clarksburg, and Damascus is where we'll be focusing. We understood from our last CNA process that place-based solutions is what works best, right? So this is going to be an investment of time. We can't carry out a CNA process that's only going to last for a couple of months and think that we're going to really get to some root causes and cultivate those partnerships that we need with community members. So we are planning to spend the next 1.5 to 2 years in those 3 specific territories, up county, working with community members and surfacing some of those issues. So you may ask why those 3 specific areas. So Germantown, despite Montgomery County being one of the wealthiest counties obviously in the country, at least 16% of the residents in Germantown have incomes below 200% of the federal poverty line, right? That's nearly, of its nearly 100,000 residents, 65% of the folks who live in Germantown are people of color, and a significant amount of them are limited English speakers. Germantown is historically under-resourced as it comes to county areas and is lacking in community governments and some anchor nonprofit institutions. Damascus, even though it has a more rural and dispersed character, has a growing Latino population with limited public transit access. It scores high in the geographic isolation from services map. Poverty has been observed concentrated in areas along the 270 corridor and further east into communities that aren't well equipped to serve lower income people. And lastly, Clarksburg, which is a rapidly growing community that has absorbed significant new residential development, including many more working class and immigrant families. Growth has outpaced the infrastructure there, and there are documented gaps in schools, transit, and human services related to its population growth, which you all are already very well familiar with within those 3 communities. Next slide, please. I do want to just highlight in closing here, as we talk about our CNA process, 3 partners that we'll be working with and planning on engaging in a strategic action as a part of our community needs assessment. So our Community Advisory Board under HHS, or known as CAB, COA, Children's Opportunity Alliance, and WorkSource Montgomery. are all at the table and will be working with us as a part of the CNA as we carry it out in the Upcounty area. Okay, in closing, 3 compelling reasons I want to share with you all here today out of this list around why we should be redesignated as a local management board in the county. A, proven systems leadership. We're the only LMB in Maryland with a community-led community needs assessment that influenced statewide policy in the form of the Enough Initiative. Our integrity framework provided a replicable model for equity work. We have demonstrated fiscal accountability, unqualified audit opinions going back a number of years and still present to this day. 85% plus of our operating budget goes out into the community and programmatic work. Diversified funding, as you all can see, continues to grow. Community power building, which is not just service delivery. So again, continuing to engage with our community change agents from the previous CNA process, a documentary which I hope you all take 40 minutes out of your time when you get an opportunity to watch, along with the accompanying watch guide, about that process and the stories that we were able to surface and cultivating those relationships and understanding the importance of place-based solutions working. So what do you all get in return when it comes to us as a local management board? You get statutory compliance, so you get service coordination, such as the local care team that Alicia spoke to earlier, and for Montgomery, state fund administration. You get innovation leadership, so a statewide model, for community engagement, policy influence well beyond Montgomery County, an equity framework that helps to inform county work, such as what Jane spoke to earlier in our work with the Department of Environmental Protection, and economic efficiency. So nonprofit flexibility, which is the benefit of us being a 501c3, and our procurement processes, and leveraged funding, as you can see with our private funds that we have leveraged from some of the private philanthropic funders that we've worked with. Lastly, in closing, and we want to thank you for your time today, but there is something that I'm going off script a little bit here that I do want to make sure that I share, especially during this last week of Black History Month. I just wanted to take a minute out as I close to recognize that I'm doing this work here today in Montgomery County because of a man who serves as not only my mentor, but has been one to so many of us, and that's Elder Art Williams. Some people change a room when they walk in, but through his advocacy and never flinching pursuit of justice, he's changed an entire community. And he's done it for well over a half a century. He doesn't just talk about righting the harms that have been done to Black people. He takes the necessary steps and actions to do so, even to this day, in his 88th year of life here in this world. Even in the face of such tragedy, such as the one that he faced last week and enduring losing a child in a car accident, he still finds ways to encourage me and others as he navigates his own loss. To know him as a mentor is to understand what it means to truly be seen and believed in. He is proof that one person committed and consistent can bend the arc of an entire generation. I don't have any living grandparents, but have adopted him as my own grandfather. So he deserves his flowers. That's why he is still here to smell them. So I want to say publicly to him, because I know he's watching online, thank you, Elder Williams. I am because you are. Appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler and members of the Collaboration Council for your presentation. And I just want to echo your remarks about Art Williams and just want to keep him and his family lifted up at this difficult time. He has contributed so much, and we were all just celebrating with him during our Black History Month program earlier this month, so it's heartbreaking to hear about what's happened to his family. And so we are going to have questions from my colleagues before I turn it over to them. We had this conversation, three committee meeting back in November, and so we just want to thank you for the follow-ups since then. Just a few questions about the community needs assessment. I know that you're about to start your new community needs assessment, and I believe you were working with the nonprofit, the Everyday Canvassing, thank you. And so will you be using this nonprofit again? And I guess how did the findings guide some of the program decisions that you've carried out since they finished their canvassing and gave recommendations?
I always defer to James. So yeah, we will continue to work with Everyday Canvassing, so our working relationship continues to this day. That canvassing and some of the findings, again, I spoke to place-based solutions as being one of the most integral parts of the findings, and understanding that people want things that are hyper-focused in on their geographies, their neighborhoods. So that's something that we're carrying over into this next CNA process with the partners that were mentioned. Again, I think also continuing to cultivate the relationships with the folks we worked with as a part of that previous CNA process is important. Sella, our community organizer, is on top of that, and it's something that they continue to raise, because I think what happens in so often, or so many cases, is that we work with people for a limited period of time and then we drop them off. And they're like, well, what's the outcome? And so that goes back to our integrity framework with that accountability. We're accountable to those folks that we worked with. So as a part of that, we had, I want to say, 3 cohorts of folks, right? We had a youth cohort, we had a down county cohort, and an up county cohort. So those up county cohort folks will be integrated into this process for this next CNA that's carried out. And we want to continue to also work with those young people as well, too, who are part of the youth cohort, because they came from across the county, right? So some of those findings that we found as a part of that will be integrated into this. And what other finding should we?
Well, and I think the reason that we did the documentary film, honestly, is so many issues and challenges were raised by community members. Everything from food insecurity to poor housing conditions, affordable housing. I mean, it ran the gamut. And so through the documentary, I mean, it's impossible to figure out how to solve all of them, right? You all know. So we're hoping to use to highlight the stories of what communities are experiencing through this film. But then one of our main takeaways, as Elijah mentioned, was that people were really feeling that more place-based solutions, services and resources that are close to where they live and work, would really help to make a difference, which is what has helped inform our decision to move forward with this place-based approach. Yeah, so.
Okay. And so I see that there are quite a few programs. I'm looking at page 12 in the packet. Out of these programs, since the community needs assessment, have we stopped any contracts? Have we changed contractors, brought on any new nonprofits to help carry out the work?
I actually don't have the packet in front of me to be able to refer back to page 12, so I apologize for that. But what I can tell you is that I'm quite sure it goes back over the course of the past few fiscal years.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So yeah, so the substance abuse work that we were doing specifically with HHS is not work that we're carrying forward any longer. There were a number of reasons why. The most important, or I think the most salient reason why, is because they didn't believe in harm reduction. And that runs counter to our integrity framework. And so we tried to work with the county around their approach. We just couldn't find an amicable space. So we decided, in keeping to alignment with our integrity framework, that was not work that we were going to continue to do in conjunction with the county. And so that work continues, just not with us. But the rest of this work continues to this day. I'm quite sure there are a number of contracts that we hold. Currently, I want to say, as of last week, we have no less than 56 subcontracts that we have as an organization. When you have a program as big as, for instance, out of school time, you have a number of contractors that come and go through each session. I know Sydney is here right now, so she could be a little bit more specific about who we may not be working with. But that could just happen because somebody's not being funded one session, maybe they get funded the next session, or they're not funded for an entire year because of the way that our funding is structured. They're funded the following year. So specifically as it relates to some of those vendors, we may not be working with some people in real time, but that does not mean that we are limiting ourselves from working with them again in the future.
Okay. And so you're no longer doing the substance abuse program with HHS, but are you doing it with another nonprofit in your entity?
We're not doing any substance abuse work.
All right. Okay. And then thinking about the basics, was that last week? We had the meeting about racial disparities in maternal health outcomes. And I know that the Basics program, which provides education for parents of children 0 to 5 through an HHS grant, is almost similar to our Babies Born Healthy program. how is that program working out right now?
So I don't want to speak to that because our basics coordinator is here, and Meredith, so I would ask for her to come up front and speak specifically to that, or Meredith. It would be disingenuous of me to suggest that I know it inside and out in the way that she does. I do want to highlight your continued support for the basics work, especially for the renovations that are happening at Walder Park with the basics installation. You were one of the earliest adopters when you were on Gaithersburg City Council and ensuring that that installation was going to move forward. We just received notice last week that that work is moving forward with that renovation of Walder Park. But again, I just want to acknowledge you publicly for the investment of time and effort that you placed into that to make that come to fruition for us. So thank you. But I will pass over to my colleague.
State your name for the record and your title, please.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Angelica De Soto. I am the Early Learning Manager for the Basics. And as you were mentioning about the Basics and the Babies
Born Healthy
Born
program.
Healthy program, so Basics is really not a program that is to replace any programs that provide direct services, but it's mostly to support those services for the families that have children under the age of 5. What we do is provide information on a weekly basis for families to know, based on the age of the child and the 5 principles that we have, what they can do at home. So as we know, parents are the first teachers of their children. So this is really supporting on a weekly basis until the child turns 5.
Okay, all right. Thank you. The Collaboration Council has been around for quite some time, and every 3 years you evaluate your program for success. Are there any measurable system-level improvements, outcomes that you have witnessed that you can share with us that you are most proud of since you've been on the board?
So there are a number of things that I'm most proud of because as you said, I've been around for a long time, right? And I think obviously even Councilperson Friedson could also speak to even the evolution that he's seen as the organization has grown throughout the years. One of the things that I would say, and I'm going to ask Alicia to take over here, is MOCA Reconnect, right? That started off, and Andrew can speak to this specifically again, because he recalls when that started off as a conversation a number of years ago about the need for a drop-in center, specifically in Montgomery County. What we were seeing around the state was that drop-in centers there was a number of them in Baltimore City and other places in the state of Maryland, but no one wanted to invest in something similar to that right here in the county. And so through a number of conversations and cultivating of resources, we were able to get that launched not that long ago in Wheaton. And to see the amount of young people that come through there that are really reliant on those services, I think is really impactful when you're able to go and see that young people are dependent on those doors being open for them to come in and get a warm meal, to be able to wash clothes, and really just to have some trusting and caring adults that they can work with in a space that's youth-centered, I think is amazing in and of itself. So I would highlight that. And Alicia, I know there's something in particular that you want to highlight about the service system that was put together. So I want to get to that in a second. But the other thing that I do want to bring up here today, because again, I know he's in the audience, is also the work of the Evening Reporting Center, as you know.
Yes.
Right, that was open because that started as a conversation a number of years ago, the need for having an evening reporting center, because again, we saw those being open to Baltimore City and other places, Baltimore County, but they weren't open here. We were able to get it open, and then when Pride Youth Services took over as our vendor, they took it to the next level. And I was able to have conversations with families, with parents who were just talking about the work that Ludley's staff had done with their young person to divert them from engaging with the juvenile justice system and really to turn their pathway around. So it's disappointing to me that their doors are not open today. What I can share with you, however, is that we are currently in conversations with DJS. We were, I want to say last week we're told, that funding is coming back for us to be able to open the ERC back up in some way, shape, or form. I know, again, you've been a staunch advocate of making sure that that happens, but we've been really proud of that work, and we want to see that open back up again, not only because of its uniqueness, but because of its importance here in the county for so many of our young people. So those are two things that I'll just highlight briefly. But Alicia, I think there's something specifically about the Mocha Reconnect approach you should highlight.
Yeah, so one of the things that I mentioned was the youth coordinated entry system. So this is the first time that Montgomery County will have a youth coordinated entry system that supports young people who are experiencing homelessness. And so it took a long time to get here. I've been at Collaboration Council for 4 years now, and prior to that was working at the Latin American Youth Center on MoCo Reconnect, and similarly working on this project. So it is great to see that through advocacy from our young people that we were actually able to get this framework created. Like I said, it does create a pathway for services to end and prevent homelessness to track young people who are experiencing homelessness, thus gathering the data to advocate for youth designated housing. Right now, we have young people who are sleeping in shelters where, you know, you can be 18 to 65, and it's pretty unsafe. They report that it's pretty unsafe, and so it is something that they've reported that they really want, and this is something that's going to lead the way to that. So we are really proud of our Youth Action Board really advocating for that. They continue to show up at all of the services to end and prevent homelessness community days. They participate in focus groups. They share their experiences. Even if they've been coming out of homelessness, they are still staunch advocates for the experiences of other young people experiencing homelessness. So that's something that I'm really proud of.
All right, thank you for sharing that. I was just meeting with the county executive. He is aware of the evening reporting center, and I believe they have found a location. So we will be hearing more about that soon. I'm going to yield to my colleagues and then do another round if necessary. Who wants to? You ready?
Yeah. Gonna try to, is it working? I don't know. We're just gonna, welcome to the 7th floor, where things may or may not work on any given day. It's okay. And I'm gonna try to keep this brief. And I know you use the term the enabler, right? The local management board is the enabler. And thank you for highlighting and uplifting the evening reporting centers and the funding challenges with the state on that. And I have a lot of deep thoughts and concerns and have raised them throughout my time on council about the whole point of DJS is you're supposed to be providing services to the kids. And if you do not fund them, not only are you not helping to prevent young people from coming into contact with a referral to DJS in the first place, but you're not serving the kids who have been at all. And I still believe, and I know we do have partners here in the county who are doing deep good work in that space, but we need so many more of them. And it's not clear to me that DJS has shifted courses despite changes in leadership and despite constant feedback from our local management boards, and I'm going to say plural because it's not just Montgomery County that's experiencing this situation. And so my question for you is, as the local management board, whether it's with respect to DJS or with other aspects of the services that need to be coordinated and seen that are being delivered and targeted in that geo-specific way that you've talked about, how are you all focusing on clearing those log jams? And how do you view yourselves as the local management board with this collaborative entity that you have and out there in the community in terms of how to phone a friend when you're needing help with the clearing of the log jams? Because we got plenty to work with. But I would love to help more with that. I love nagging, politely. But, there are a lot of complex issues here that aren't going to get solved by any one organization. And no one should need to take credit or ownership for that. And I'm saying that as an elected official, which is not something that elected officials are particularly good at saying. But I don't really care about what's posted on social media. I do care that that child who didn't get what they were entitled to or should have had missed that opportunity and then moves on to young adulthood in a vastly worse place. So could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, certainly, and there's no disagreement from us as in terms of your perspective there. So, you know, without throwing anyone under the bus, the closing of the ERC, as an example, came as an absolute shock and surprise to us. It happened exactly 2 weeks into the new fiscal year. And again, you know, Ludley is here with us. You know, unfortunately, we had just had a conversation with Pride and with Ludley about re-upping the lease that they held as a part of carrying out those evening reporting center services. He re-signed a lease on the belief that this funding was coming down. And so July 1 comes, and we were all anticipating that the funding was coming through, and we found out 2 weeks into that fiscal year that there was no funding coming through. We weren't even sure if they were going to cover the expenses for those few weeks into the new fiscal year. I believe that Lovely just received payment not that long ago.
Really?
For that work that was done in that meantime. So, you know, as in terms of our role, I think this is where we're really nimble as a local management board. It's because, keeping in mind, we're not just codified in county legislation, we're codified at the state level as well too, right? So LMBs came out of the state in 1993. And so that allows for us to go to the state level with advocacy and allows for us to have conversations with folks. You know, at the time, the former head of DJS is no longer there. I do have a good working relationship with the new head of DJS. So I have had conversations with her about this. We've talked to staff about this. We remain very hopeful again. We were told in writing, I don't believe until the check clears, to be honest with you. That's my approach.
I don't either, sir. I think that is a wise strategy.
So it's great for you to tell me that something's going to happen, but until I actually see the check come through, then I can't believe it.
Yeah.
So again, we were told last week that funding is going to come down for us to open the ERC kind of in a re-envisioned kind of way. We don't know exactly what that means or the amount of funding that's going to
Because
come along
it's
with
dependent upon what you're getting.
Right. But to your point again, this didn't just happen in Montgomery County.
No.
Right, this happened across. So I got together with colleagues in Dorchester and Howard County because it happened there as well too.
Yeah.
And we in unison went to the state with a bunch of questions and asking for this to be cleared up in consideration of the impact of the loss of these services we're going to have on our communities. And so that dialogue is ongoing. Is it promising? It's hard for me to say right now because what we continue to hear from DJS is that they're kind of trying to work with Governor Moore's budget to see what's going to be allocated there. Obviously, Governor Moore has ideas around what he wants to see happening with juvenile justice, and that directly impacts DJS in their budget. But, you know, to come to us and to say that, you know, we over budgeted, and so we have to close this, is frankly, it's not acceptable. But we will continue with that advocacy at the state level, and certainly, you know, I invite you to be a part of those conversations as we have them, because I think having you all in the room for those conversations, I see it as being only a value add to try to light additional fire.
Yeah.
Under our partners.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, we're all collectively dealing with plenty of unpredictability that is outside the sphere of state or local government control. And we are doing the best we can to manage that. And when I say we, I mean all of you here, anybody listening at home, everybody, all the people. But you know, and I do know the acting secretary well from my work for the 9 years I spent with the state. You know, but I do think that what we can try to do or manage and communicate clearly here locally and or with our state partners, we owe an obligation to, and to make sure that that communication is constant and ongoing, because otherwise, you know, we're dealing with too much other noise out in the universe right now, and I don't want to see things adversely affected like that. And I thank you for highlighting the up-county areas that you are focusing on. You know, I represent my district boundary falls between Damascus and Clarksburg. So much so between that sometimes Councilmember Balcom and I have to check the map to see which side of the street the property is on, but we talk constantly. But
the transportation issues, once you're outside of Germantown, are significant. And they are impacting both our districts in Clarksburg and Damascus. So thank you for highlighting that. It's something we have been pressing about, because if we have other goals related to climate, that's one thing, right? Where we want to make sure there's more public transit, but also it's just a functionality issue. And young people in the Up County can't get to an internship or a part-time job or anything, because not only do they not have a bus or any public transit, you can't, like, try riding a bike on some of those roads. I wouldn't, and I wouldn't want my kids doing it, right? And so those are all key critical things to focus on in terms of what's impacting or affecting, you know, our youth, our families, and how they can get to services and what types of things are offered in these areas. And people often forget, because particularly Damascus, it is tucked way up there. And yet it is more densely populated than now, as more housing has come online, than people might have recalled. More development has happened in Clarksburg, way more. But there's strain back and forth between the two, and there's strain back and forth between the two schools too, with overcrowding situations and other issues. So thank you for that. I'm just double checking my notes. Sorry, I have a notepad and I'm a left-handed person, and sometimes rereading my own handwriting is challenging. I look forward to seeing the film. Thank you for doing that and uplifting that. I think hearing directly from people is important and a great way to give humanity to the problem. So thank you for that. And with that, I turn it back over.
Thank you, Councilmember Lutke, and now Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. One of the reasons why I'm really excited to join this committee is this session in particular, and the public-private partnership opportunities that we have, and really the Collaboration Council is intended to serve that role of being at the center of public-private partnership and how we address our youth and adolescent issues, our children, youth, and family challenges. And we're in a moment in so many different circumstances and dynamics, and we are in a moment with our youth, and we are in a moment with our kids. And I just really appreciate all of the work, the partners, and the efforts. I do go way back with this organization. It was really my entree into county government, besides being a kid who benefited from services and recreation programs and other dynamics. My professional life in county government really started with my volunteer service as a public member of the board. And so I really appreciate quite a bit of change that has occurred and the efforts that have been undertaken by the board and by the staff, and really just want to express my appreciation for that. And I'll note a couple things. Before I continue, I did want to just acknowledge and appreciate your heartfelt words and the chair's heartfelt words about Mr. Williams, and just want to echo, as I think we all do, our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts with their family, and just really appreciate you sharing your personal connection. And as you noted, you're one of many, which is really a beautiful dynamic and shows the impact that one person can truly have. And I think that story really speaks to this whole dynamic, this question of mentorship, this question of positive youth development. And positive youth development happens based on relationships. It happens based on people. And programs help to facilitate that, but it really is the people that make that happen. I appreciate you talking about the drop-in center in particular. I worked on that quite a bit. It was one of my significant interests in seeing that come to fruition. And I think it leads into the conversation I want to have a little bit and that you started to talk about in your presentation. It was part of the conversation that we were having when I was on the board and that the county has had about how do we address concerns about state funding, which, while we appreciate our state delegates who you noted for their championing these efforts and providing more funding for local management boards across the state and providing more access to those funds. The percentages are telling a story that state funding is diminishing as a total amount of the percentage of the organization. And I'm heartened by the fact that there is quite a bit more real dollars of private investment. Percentage-wise, it has gone up a bit, but it's not up at the point I think that any of us would prefer and would want. And there was a goal, previously, 10 years ago, to get that to 10% prior to now. That hasn't happened yet, and that's an ongoing effort. There's been considerable efforts. You've also grown quite a bit, which is a good thing. But part of the dynamic, and I just want to get your feedback on this. We tried on the drop-in center to get private investment in the drop-in center. The challenge that we found is that the cost per person for something like a drop-in center was so significant that it was very hard in competing with private philanthropic dollars to get funding for an effort like that. Even though the impact is so significant, it is targeted more than broad-based. And much of the impact analysis that many of the private philanthropic grants and programs we're looking at was much more focused on broad-based impacts, the total numbers of people who would be served, the total number of people who would be impacted. That has been a success. I'm really happy that it has moved forward. It moved forward with public state dollars and other support. But just wanted to speak a little bit to not just how we got to where we are, which is a lot of what this presentation was focused on, but what do things look like moving forward, particularly in light of what is likely to be significantly diminished state funding, at least not keeping up with the growth that you're expecting and that you're hoping to see. The county government is not going to be able to maintain the level of growth and to keep things going at the level they are to fill any gap of that nature. We're going to have our own challenges. And so the question becomes, what, if any, opportunities there are to get that number up to a higher number in private philanthropic and community-based partnerships. What does that look like? What's the strategy? And is there a number? And is there a time frame? Is 10% the right number? Was that the wrong number? Should it be higher? Should there be a period of time? So I just want to hear a little bit from you about what your thoughts are on that, how you're approaching it. I know it's been an ongoing conversation. I think there has been some progress there, which I'm happy to see. But I think the challenges are only going to get more significant, and I'd be interested to hear how you're going to be approaching it moving forward.
Appreciate that, Councilperson Friedson. So again, you have a long history with this organization and understanding a lot of conversations that happened a number of years ago. One of the things that I do want to highlight is even going back to 2020 and seeing the divestment, I think in many ways, of the federal government and the impact that had on nonprofits. So as you looked at our pie chart, you noticed you saw $0 from the federal government. And so we saw that divestment happen, frankly speaking, with this most recent, I don't even know how to refer to this administration, to be honest with you, right? This is their second time up, but we saw that initial divestment, the first time up with this administration. We weren't seeing any kind of rebound with the Biden administration whatsoever, because I think they were busy playing catch up and trying to right some of the wrongs that had happened. And then we're in this case we're in right now, right? And so I think what we're doing is we are competing with a lot of folks around the nation for limited resources, frankly speaking, right? And Montgomery County is not really attractive to a lot of philanthropic funders. But I think one of the things that's important and should be highlighted about us and our strategy is that when you looked at the funders in that list, is that you just didn't see local philanthropic entities. You saw national and nationally based entities. That's a first for this organization, right? That's the first time in a number, at least since I've been around, right, in 16 plus years, that we've been able to attract organizations such as Bombas, Patagonia, and other folks who are willing to invest in the work. And specifically, Bombas and Patagonia have invested in MOCA Reconnect, right? So as we were talking about MOCA Reconnect, the housing fund, as we saw, on the slide deck as well too, specifically invest in MOCA Reconnect. So I think it's important to recognize that one of the things that the county has done with the funds that we receive from you all is that it allows for us to leverage that. You all have provided us this ability to be able to go out to these private philanthropic entities and say, this is the work that we have done already. There's this stable kind of grounding that we have, and we'd like for you all to match or to surpass that. Same thing happened with the funding that we received from Meyer Foundation to carry out the MOCA Boost work. Meyer only invested once they saw the county invest, and I believe there was a one-to-one match of roughly like $1 million. I can't recall offhand where that happened, but I think part of our strategy is continuing to highlight the folks who have invested in us, and then typically what we see is that when we go from one philanthropy to another, they always ask, well, who's already invested in you? Because what we see 9 times out of 10 is they want to meet or best.
Yeah, the MOCA Boost is kind of an interesting dynamic. I mean, that was kind of the deal that was made at the outset. So I think part of the question here that I think we should talk through and think through as we move forward, we don't have to have the answer today necessarily, and it's not contingent on my decision of designation, but I do think it should be part of our discussions as we move forward with this work. Is the model more to align and set up the matching public-private partnerships before we set up the programs? Is that really the better model? Is that the more successful area? Is that the opportunity? Or is it we go in first and set up the pilot, and then we then sell the pilot and the data that you're collecting from your service providers, and then try to use that where we're doing it? I see a positive, negative here. The negative is, if we're doing a pilot, the county is pretty much 100% of the public dollar investment, and that there's a risk factor to that. Where it's all taxpayers that are assuming that responsibility. The benefit is the leverage is better than one-to-one theoretically. In an ideal world, if you're doing it that way, we should be taking the significant risks on the front end to see how it works. But if it works, and if the data shows that this is a really clear and obvious opportunity to really dramatically change positive youth development or risk, or whatever the case may be, whatever you're working on, then you go to the philanthropic organizations, the private entities, the businesses, et cetera, and say, okay, this is work that you care about. Here's a proven model. We've shown it. You don't have to do the hard work. We did the hard work for you. But instead of it being 1-to-1, that leverage should be 5-to-1, 6-to-1, 7-to-1, 10-to-1, because the risk has been taken away. I don't have an answer to that. I think there's positives and negatives to both of those approaches, but I do think there's a difference to the strategy of which way you structure it, and I've thought about both, and I think that it should be part of the thought process, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, just immediately, and I agree with you. I would say heading into fiscal year 27, the strategy would be the former and not the latter, right? Because I think to ask for the county to invest in something that has no proof of concept with the hope that we can get a philanthropic entity to then not backfill, but match or surpass whatever the county's investment has been is maybe a strategy for disaster, because we don't know what FY28 is going to look like, right? So I think, and frankly, that's the financially speaking, the hard decisions you all have to make and are tasked with. I would say, for me and for us, it would make much more sense if there are agreements up front, right? Those private and public agreements up front before we launch something like that, with an expectation or understanding of what we're looking at a few years down the line. Then I think that's a little bit easier to digest, fiscally speaking, in this moment. But even case in point, in the conversations that we've had about the drop-in center, and I don't know the numbers exactly, but I would tell you that overwhelmingly, I would say roughly 80 to 85% of the drop-in center budget comes from the state. So one of the things that would be important, I think, for us, just again, using the drop-in center as an example, we know that the county has a ton of empty space that's just laying around. It would have been great for us if the county had said, at the very least, what we're going to do is provide you with the space. You bring in the private funds, you bring in the state funds or what have you, but we, give you this lease for a penny, for $1, whatever it may be, so that you can operate this program, build the proof of concept, and continue to resource it and leverage those dollars for something like that. I think a partnership like that, again, just using the drop-in center as a specific example, would go a long way. And not just for Collaboration Council, but I think for nonprofits, writ large across the board, that if the county can find some of the things that it can provide in kind outside of dollars in the form of space, being able to leverage that is a huge load off of many of our budget sheets, right? It's the space, which would be huge. And just using that again as an example, to your point, I don't think we can solve it immediately. And I think that each fiscal year has a different tale or story to it. But even just thinking about removing space as a barrier to carry out programming would be huge for so many nonprofits here in the county.
Appreciate that. Well, continued conversation, but I think it's an important one because funding, no margin, no mission, as we used to say in my nonprofit world. So appreciate it. I'll yield back, and thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedson. Just had a question about the out-of-school time. I know that they joined us at the last meeting, the Outreach Network. I know that there was a discussion about an MOU and some updates regarding a work plan. Can you share any progress that has been made and where we're at with that?
I know you all were looking for that. Councilperson Friedson asked for that specifically, said don't come back here without some up. So I'm going to ask for Sydney to join me up front, our Director of Programs.
Good afternoon. My name is Sydney Wilson-Hunter. I'm the Director of Programs at the Collaboration Council. About the Out-of-School Time Network, the MOU has been signed. We're really excited about that. We've been celebrating that for a couple weeks now. And our next step is having a discussion around our funding proposal and where that should sit. And so that is our conversation that we're having next week. And so we'll move forward with that. But the MOU is signed. The network is meeting, and now we're just working on shoring up and confirming that funding proposal and delivering that to you all.
Okay, and how's the data sharing been decided? How are we doing that?
In terms of, in regards to the MOU?
Yes.
So the data sharing agreement hasn't been developed yet. We are still in process of collecting data per the needs assessment.
Okay.
But that is the latest update from there.
I guess I'm trying to understand how I thought that was going to be part of the MOU, was how you were going to be sharing data from what the Street Outreach Networks programs were doing, their outcomes, the goals, versus the Collaboration Council and how it's informing programmatic decisions and partnerships. Was that not included in the MOU?
The MOU is between the Recreation Department and the school system, the MCPS.
Okay. So you all don't have access to the data between those two entities?
Those two entities are agreeing on sharing data, but outside of that, no.
Okay, all right. Well, those were all the questions that I had. Well, no, I just had one more question. You mentioned that we are going to be coming up on a, difficult budget season. And so I know that we're all being asked to do more with less. What services do you think would be impacted first if cuts need to be made?
So obviously that's a conversation that, the board and I need to have, specifically the board's fiscal committee as well as our executive committee. Every year, as we prepare the upcoming year's fiscal budget, we essentially prepare 3 budgets, right? Those 3 budgets are best case scenario, which is more funding, which I don't believe any of us anticipate that that's going to happen. Worst case scenario, which is a cut, and a stable scenario, which is if everything stays stable and flat for the year, right? So those are the 3 budgets that we prepare ourselves for. As we look at any potential cuts to anything, one of the things that I think is important that everyone here is aware of and knows that the very last cut that we can afford to make is to programs, directly speaking. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, that's the last thing. We cannot continue to leverage or cut the folks who need the programs the most when we're up against these decisions. It's the people and communities who receive these services who get the least. And to me, that's just not viable, that when we make these cuts, that we cut the programs that folks are reliant upon. So for us as an organization, and I think you all recognize that I look at this work through the lens of business. I recognize we're a 501c3, right? But I think one of the things that we have to consider if there are cuts, then the first thing that I have to look at is, you know, what's happening as in terms of salaries and positions, frankly speaking. One of the things that staff knows already is that we have a hiring freeze. If it is not a role that is integral to our operations, we're not hiring for it. So I can tell you that we're starting there. I have to look at staffing first, frankly speaking, you know, and I have to review budgets. I would like to believe that we are very competitive as in terms of the salaries that we offer our staff. The benefits package, we cover over 80% of our employees' benefits. They cover the rest. I think that's really attractive, especially in this region and in the nonprofit area. But again, I cannot stomach cuts to programs.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we are ready to make a vote. Who wants to move the?
Like to move to approve the resolution. It is a resolution, correct? Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
So thank you. All those in favor? All right, so it is approved. We will be reapproving the Collaboration Council as our local management board. And we look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you over the next few years. Thank you all for everything you're doing for our children, youth, and families. We are adjourned. Thank you.